Gives me great pleasure to bring on board Mr. Ronojoy Dutta, CEO of Indigo, to talk about which way the aviation sector is moving. How should one read into the recovery data which most of the sectors like aviation, auto and other high frequency data indicators are indicating? Is the worst behind the aviation sector, and where essentially is the business headed? Mr. Dutta, such a pleasure to have you on ET now. Words cannot express how excited I am. It's my first interaction with you on this forum, so we all are really looking forward to an exciting interview.
Thank you. You're very gracious and kind, Nikunj. Thank you.
Mr. Dutta, first allow me to understand the big picture from you. And the big picture is that parts of economy are making a comeback. Aviation on a standalone basis has also made a comeback. So has terrible become bad, or has terrible become good for the aviation sector?
Back in April, May, we really didn't know what to expect as we opened up the flying. And we had different scenarios, of course. One was a disaster scenario where the economy would be very weak, people would be scared to travel, airline travel would really struggle and not come back. And then we had what we called a realistic scenario, and then we had an optimistic scenario. And in the optimistic scenario, two things needed to happen. Of course, the economy needed to grow. Without economic growth, aviation suffers. But it was equally important for us to talk about confidence of the traveling public in airline travel. Because even with a strong economy and low confidence, airline travel would have struggled. I'm pleased to say both parameters are working well. We do have a stronger economy, and we have great confidence in airline travel as best as we can see. As a result, both the disaster scenarios off the table and the realistic scenarios also off the table. We seem to be moving along in an optimistic scenario. And to sort of add some flesh to that, we started with about 25% of our capacity flying on May 25th. We've gradually moved it up, and today we are flying about 58% of our capacity. We'd love to go to 80% very quickly. A lot depends, of course, on the government. They have to remove the caps, and specific states like Mumbai, Chennai, West Bengal, they need to remove the restrictions as well. But domestically in particular, we are very optimistic, and we'd like to add a lot of capacity quickly.
So there are two ways to look at it. One, the capacity or the caps is removed by the government. What happens to the total yields then? And what if the constraints are not removed? What happens to yields then?
So actually, there's no reason to keep the capacity going, because if the demand was weak, I would say yes, keep the capacity, because then airline revenues would be stronger. But at this point, there really is no reason to keep the caps. And all the numbers we are seeing, yields are moving up, our total loads are moving up. So removing the caps would be good for the economy, good for airline travel, and it will not hurt our revenue. We are very sure about that.
This pandemic has, in a sense, rebooted a lot of new normal. And some would argue that for business travel, given that the dependence on digital has increased, you and me are engaging on a digital platform right now as we speak. Do you think there could be a reboot in essential business travel which could hurt both the short-term, medium-term and the long-term prospects of the aviation sector?
So we really have obviously two distinct segments of travel, business and leisure. There's no doubt in anyone's mind that business travel is going to take a hit. And as you rightly pointed out, digital is a big reason for that. However, on the lower end, the leisure travel, and by leisure, I don't mean people traveling for holidays. It's really people traveling still on business. They just don't happen to be the corporate class. But it's small businesses, it's migrant labor, it's people looking for jobs, and also families getting together. That class of travel is where the growth is, and that is very, very strong. And as long as the economy remains or gets stronger over time, and the confidence in flying is already there, all our projections say that the demand growth is going to be high. If there's one area we need some help from the government, it's actually on the international. Because while domestic is already at 60% capacity and going towards 80%, I hope, international is only at 20% of where we were before. And the government is doing some actions in terms of bubbles and Vande Bharats and all that, but we need more growth in international. And while Europe is really struggling, I think closer to home, places like Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bangladesh, Singapore, Thailand, I think that's where the government should make a serious effort into adding more frequency and flights, because there we are really constrained only at about 20% of our earlier capacity.
Mr. Dutta, when you reported your results last week, markets got mighty excited because even though you reported a loss, the loss was much less than what analysts were penciling in. But large part of your cost control has come because of drop in fuel cost and employee cost reduction. Some would argue that these are one-time reboots and they are not permanent in nature, and cost will come back as things will normalize.
We are also doing permanent. Fuel, as you say, is rightly is very volatile. But if you look at fuel, it's on a secular downtrend. Fact is, all over the world, people are moving more into green energy, etc. So fuel is not just because of the pandemic. Even before that, we saw fuel going down. And it seems to be a secular downtrend in that regard. On other areas, our biggest scope for cost reduction is really in fleet efficiency. So we're returning all our old classic engines, and anyone who's followed the Indigo story, we ran into some trouble 2 years ago with higher maintenance costs on our old classic engines, and we're returning those at a very fast pace and taking on brand new Neos, which have both lower fuel burn and lower maintenance costs. So that is going to be a very structural change for us. On top of that, of course, we're looking at all areas, including talking to our suppliers, looking for improved productivity. And one of the reasons why Indigo is doing well is when we shut down, we said, let's retool our business. Let's look at every opportunity we have to come out of this stronger. And we started with the product. So we knew that confidence in flying was important, but we wanted to provide a much higher level of customer service than we've ever done before. And it's showing in the numbers. When you look at the appreciations versus complaints, we've never seen such good numbers ever before at Indigo. So the product is better. Employee engagement is very high, and we are in a customer service business. And clearly the experience in the airplane depends so much on how engaged the employees are at the airport and in the flight. And our employee engagement numbers are good, and that is resulting in higher customer service. So all the major measures of Indigo quality, if you will, customer service, employee engagement, brand, ratio of acknowledgements to complaints, all those numbers are moving in the right direction. And if you look at our yields, despite all the problems the industry is facing, our year-over-year yields have actually gone up 8%. And I believe that is largely because people have greater confidence in the Indigo product. And it shows up in two areas in particular: charter flights. We're doing very well on charter flights, and at the same time, our group desk is very, very busy. So I guess if you took 40 random strangers and said, we are doing a group travel to Goa, which airline would you like to fly? I think the vast majority would say, let's go on Indigo. And that's why we are getting such good traction in our pricing as well.
Your market share is clearly reminiscent of that, Mr. Dutta. I remember when Indigo went public, the market share was just north of 40%. Now it's almost nearing 60%. So, your good work, I guess, is getting reflected in the market share. With this formidable market share, Mr. Dutta, there are two challenges. One, you will be tempted to perhaps follow a policy which will always give you an edge over others. And second is that in order to maintain this market share, you may be, in a sense, be forced to also keep the yields low. Is that a concern? I mean, is your ambition to maintain more market share or more profitability?
So let me just talk about market share. And while there's been a gradual uptrend in market share, I'm very pleased that before the pandemic in January, we carried 48% of Indian customers. Uh, uh, Today, we're carrying about, in September, I think we carried about 58%. So there's been a sharp rise in the percentage of customers carried. And that is not because of pricing, obviously. We are all pricing at the same level. I think it's because of our higher level of customer service and employee engagement. Now, what happens going forward? We are very cognizant of the fact that Indigo is a national asset. Our whole mission is we want to produce great connectivity for India, from small cities to big cities to countries around us. So growth is very, very important for us. Therefore, what is our bottom line strategy, if you will? It is keep reducing costs and keep growing fast, connecting the entire country. So if there are problems in Aurangabad, the hotels write to us saying, we are not getting enough flights. If IGEL says, we don't have any customer service, we don't do a huge economic analysis. We say, we are a national asset. Of course, places like Aurangabad, Hubli, IGEL, they need to be connected. So we really are seeing this from a national point of view. So to that extent, I don't think our market share is in any way a negative for the country. It's something that is very good for the country because we intend to keep going in terms of connecting more and more cities together. Overall, our goal is to grow fast and keep prices low.
Mr. Dutta, let's understand the cash burn. Now, cash burn in between quarters has come down, but if by December or if by Jan, government does not allow to increase the domestic capacity caps, will your cash burn remain the same what you've reported for the quarter gone by?
As you correctly point out, because there's underlying demand, even if more capacity is not added, revenue will go up. Now, that is not the path we'd like to be on. We'd like to keep prices low and increase capacity. But if the government keeps a cap on the capacity, prices unfortunately will go up because the demand will so much be there. So what does it do to cash burn over time? We are very, as I said, we did many scenarios beyond the optimistic scenario now. And our plan is, our forecasts are that we'll be at 80% capacity by the end of the year domestically and at 100% of capacity by early next year, by say April, May. International will be a slower growth. As we add capacity, our cash burn problem will solve itself. Clearly, cash burn, you can you work on it either by getting more debt, by raising equity. That's not the path we are following. We want to keep a strong balance sheet really by growing revenues quickly. And I'm optimistic that's exactly what's going to happen.
So what is the sweet spot at which, in terms of capacity utilization, your cash burn becomes zero?
Total capacity, that's now including international, we need to be at least 85-90%. So I'm hoping that domestically we get to 85%, 90% early next year. International will probably be, again, these are my aspirations, depends on how the government behaves also. And I'm hoping that by September of next year, we are back to international full capacity as well. So look, bottom line, I think Indigo is out of the crisis. I was very worried we'd be in a crisis. Now everything I look, it's a matter of timing. Is it now? Is it next week? Is it next month? It's really a timing issue. But the crisis scenario is beginning to disappear slowly. And I think that's not just true for aviation, by the way. I think I'm optimistic about you were talking about other industries also. And now a lot depends on us, frankly. Good things don't just happen on their own. Good things happen because it's made to happen. So I think it's the responsibility of every industry, whether it's autos or banks or airlines, to make sure the industry works. I think the country needs it desperately. We have a situation where China is growing at 5% a year and we're shrinking at 9% a year. That clearly needs to turn around and turn around quickly. And it'll only happen if every industry is working hard to make sure the numbers look good going forward. So, I mean, Indigo is very focused on let's make the airline industry work for India because it creates jobs, it helps the economy, and I think every industry needs to take that point of view.
But it's good to hear that, because that's one industry where, in a sense, we know that employment, it has really created employment. It's unfortunate to see what's happened to the sector and what's happened to the industry. Mr. Dutta, a question aside from Indigo. Now, in India, the aviation sector is still at a very niche level, looking at our demand, looking at our population, looking at how our cities are expanding. But frankly, with the exception of one or maximum two airlines, which is Indigo and SpiceJet, other airlines historically in India have struggled. I'm not getting into specific names here, but I sometimes look at the size of the opportunity versus what the sector has gone through in terms of ups and downs. Why has that happened?
We have to remember that, first of all, India is a very difficult, I'd almost say hostile environment for airlines. Our costs are very high. We are taxed at the highest rate in the world, I think. On top of that, 70% of our costs are in dollars, and every year the dollar gets stronger by 3% and the rupee gets weaker. And so every year we have an underlying growth in our cost structure. So very difficult situation from that standpoint. On the revenue side, it's also one of the lowest yield markets in the world. Our average ticket prices one way is like $50. I'm doing it in an international point of reference. There are very few countries where you can fly for an hour and a half and pay only $50. So you have this environment of high taxation, high costs, and very low yields. So it's a difficult environment to operate in, and therefore there's a very, very narrow path to success. Not that there isn't a path to success. I think of it as a jungle with a trail, and you better follow the trail. If you step this way on this side or go out on the other side, you'll get lost and you can't find your way back. And I think part of the reason many airlines have gotten into trouble is they haven't stuck to the straight and the narrow trail, if you will. They started experimenting with the product, started experimenting with different flight segments in different countries. And it's like you can't do that. It has to be a very risk-averse, sort of stay on the grind, just do everything right, and then you can succeed. And that's what we're trying to do. We're very cautious. We don't do experimental things. We really need to stick to the beaten path.
So how exactly have your underlying policies and approach changed? I mean, is there a new complete dimension in which you're looking at your expansion, corporate and Indigo business policy, which could be divided into a pre-COVID era and the COVID era? Have there been a substantial change in your thought process and adaptation to this pandemic, just apart from cost control?
Yes. And people say that airlines are a commodity business, that everything is based on price. And that's been true all over the world for years. I think, excuse me, with the pandemic, I think people will be more conscious about the brand. From a safety, a security, I feel good doing this, etc. So they will still look for the lowest price, but there will be some brand differentiation going forward. And we are therefore very focused on making sure that while we offer the lowest price, we also provide customer confidence and brand value. And that has been an area of lot of focus on our side with employees, with our communications, with our advertising. Everything is geared towards produce a higher level of customer confidence and customer experience. So that, I think, is one area in which is very new for us in some ways. We're looking for other streams of revenue. Cargo, we are very excited about. And part of what has happened is that wide body capacity all over the world has gone down. It's not like cargo revenues have grown. They have not. Cargo revenues are actually down. But wide bodies, which used to carry most of the cargo, they are grounded. Therefore, narrow bodies are carrying more and more cargo. And we are making full advantage of that opportunity. So although we are flying only 58%, our cargo revenues year over year are up 20%. So you can see how much difference that switch has made. At the same time, charter revenues. We've always been a scheduled airline. And charter airlines and scheduled airlines have very different processes, as you can imagine, in terms of scheduling, slots, reservations, all of that. We're trying to run in parallel, and I give credit to the nimbleness of Indigo's operating people, that they're able to do both. So yes, there has been some changes. I think it's all for the better. And, I have to say that overall, I believe the environment for airlines in India is transforming into a better environment. I talked about how hostile it is, how tough it is, but the fact is a few things are going to work in our favor. And this is all on the revenue side. Cost, as I said, yes, fuel will go down, we'll do everything on the fleet side. But for the industry as a whole, I believe the revenue environment will become more benign, driven by the fact that so many more Indians will be traveling. Right now, as you know, only 5% of Indians experience air travel. But there is a big growth happening in the middle class. I think train journeys will be perceived to be more difficult. Our costs will come down. And can you imagine 5% of Indians traveling to 15% of Indians traveling? What that does to our volumes, our revenues, and so forth. Equally, internationally, part of our problem has been that hubs around India have been overbuilt. And that has been a problem for Air India, it has been a problem for Jet. But as we move forward, since connecting traffic will suffer, places like Dubai, Thailand, Singapore, all of these overbuilt hubs will struggle a little in terms of capacity into India, which would be great for Indian airlines with narrow-body capacity going out. So with all that, frankly, I'm optimistic about the Indian economy. I'm optimistic about airlines. I'm clearly optimistic about Indigo. But like I said before, things don't just happen. You have to make them happen. So the opportunities are out there. Now it's up to each one of us to really work hard and do all the right thing, make all the right decisions, and move forward.
I'm going to take a leaf from your powerful comment that Indigo is out of the crisis. You are sharing a very optimistic and a constructive scenario, and this is something which is a delight to hear from an airline company, because the perception is that airline companies are going through a massive struggle. Assuming, Mr. Dutta, that the worst is behind us and the best is yet to come, how are you preparing Indigo for 2022 and 23? 2021 could be a different year, 2020 will be a different year, but 2022 and 23 is where your focus is. Would you be expanding more? Would you be looking at new areas of expansion, both in terms of fleet and also in terms of routes?
Let me go back a little to your initial comment, and I'll answer your question in a minute. About I'm painting an optimistic picture of the future. Listen, I think we should all be very, very impatient at this point. Look what happened to China under Deng Xiaoping. In 15 years, China's economy grew 10 times. Their average wages grew 6 times. The level of poverty dropped from 41% to 5%. Now, that's what they did. I think the whole world should applaud them. It's the greatest alleviation of the human condition, if you will, for the whole planet. It's fantastic. We need to do that. And we can't hang around and say, yeah, slow growth will eventually get there. No, we need it now. So I think it's being optimistic, but being impatient. Let's make it happen. Let's make it happen quickly. Now, I'll answer your second question, which is, so what happens next in 22-23? A lot of growth. So we have paused for growth for 2 years. This coronavirus, from everything I believe, has set us back by 2 years, not more than that. So for 2 years, we need to pause and catch up. Therefore, in fiscal year 22 and 21, will be slow growth to down slightly. But 23, we want to come back full steam. And we're going to grow, and we're going to grow fast again. And we're going to go domestic, and we're going to grow international. And domestic, as you know, we've got these long-range planes coming. And we have these cities, new cities, that I wish I could announce right now. But I'm talking about international now, we also have an underlying theme that look, airlines are a key part of a country's geopolitics. So where India goes, Indigo is going to grow. So we watch very carefully which are the countries that India is getting closer to. And is there an airline connection there? No, then why not? Indigo will be there, jumping in. So we're going to grow both domestic, will be in small towns, small cities, high frequencies. And the concept we have, frankly, is that let's say you're going from Bhubaneswar to Surat. It's unlikely there'll be non-stop flights from Bhubaneswar to Surat and not more than 1 or 2 a day. But we want to give you 5 or 6 different ways at different times of the day to get from Bhubaneswar to Surat. So there could be a 7 a.m. through Hyderabad, 9 a.m. through Delhi, 12:30 a.m. through Mumbai, and so on. So we want to provide lots of ways for people to travel between tier 2 and tier 2 cities within domestic. And internationally, we are going to grow to lots of destinations that India has never flown into. And it's not all about going to London and New York. Yeah, fine. It's all very exciting, but that's not our story. We want to grow to all cities. You just draw cities around the map. And as you know, we have a 4-corner strategy. From Delhi, we can go to a lot of destinations within 6 hours. From Mumbai, or lots of places in Africa. From Chennai, lots of places in Southeast. And from Kolkata, lots of places in North Asia. And we've got this 6-hour globe map, if you will, with all the big cities in there. And Indigo is going to cover all of them. That's our plan.
Just a couple of last 2 questions. I'll not extend my appointment beyond that. Every company I've interacted with, they are talking about how digitization is going to change the way the cost and the business would evolve. Pharma companies are saying we are moving towards a platform. Television studio like ours, we've managed to work from home. IT companies, 97%, 98% employees are working from home. In the aviation sector, for Indigo, in this pandemic, what is that big disruption you adopted which you never imagined could have happened?
Well, so digitalization, our plan is to digitize everything. And that's from the customer's point of view and from the employee's point of view. So let me take the employee's point of view first, whether it's flight attendants or pilots, the old way of doing business, if you will. They come to a place in the base, whether it's Hyderabad or Delhi, and then they stand in line and there's a desktop and there's a queue of people there. Then they wait their turn, they do their check-in and their load and fuel checks and so forth, and then they go. And all that takes time. And we're like, why can't they do it from home on their iPhone? So they should know before leaving home, this is my flight, this is who I'm flying with, the flight is on time, this is the fuel burn that is expected, this is how many passengers are going to be there, this is how much catering is being loaded. They should see all that on their iPhone, not waste time with an hour and a half. And then if they have all that information upfront, they can plan better. From the customer's point of view, we think an Indigo customer should be continuously in touch with Indigo on the day of travel. So we should tell you, good morning, we see you're traveling, your flight is on time, you come to the airport, you leave. When you leave, your bag, we see you've picked up your bag. If there's a problem, we should be sending you those solutions right away, even before you call us. So our goal is, God forbid, you miss your bag. Well, you shouldn't be standing and waiting for that call to Indigo and no one's picking up the phone and 6 hours, okay, I'll try again. We have a policy now that we're trying to implement. Every 4 hours, you'll get an update. We see that we lost your bag or it was misplaced. The bag is in Hyderabad on its way to Bhopal. It'll be there at 3 o'clock. If we don't give it to you, 4 hours later, before you call us, we'll give you an update. So whether it is customer service or employees, we're trying to digitize everything, and believe me, it'll result in higher quality and lower costs.
Last but one question, Mr. Dutta. In this pandemic, what has been your most challenging experience? And we know that there is a promoter challenge. It may be in a private domain, but did that make decision making slightly hard for you as the CEO of Indigo?
The promoter issue is a nuisance issue, if I may. It's something is happening in London in terms of arbitration and all that. We don't talk about it. I never hear about it. It's something, you know more about it than I do probably. So it does not in any way influence our thinking, our processes, our discussions. But you asked what is the most difficult challenge in the pandemic in particular. So you're dealing with uncertainty. You're dealing with probabilities of different paths that could happen. And you have to look for solutions that address each one of the outcomes. You can't say, okay, I'll just follow this path and this is what we're going to do. So you need to get, in creating a plan, first of all, you need to open it up for all kinds of ideas. So one firm belief I have is that 10 heads are better than one. And therefore, no matter what we do, we want to take a lot of input from a broad array of people. So the first step is, okay, these are the possible outcomes, what should we do? And open it up for as much discussion as you can. And I really tell our top management, please critique. And I can't tell you how happy I am that we have such open dialogue with so many people involved, because it really results in a more high quality discussion. But then it comes, okay, but now we need to close. So you've got all these ideas, all these different points of view that you've cultivated, you've fostered, and now you need to shut off this and say, okay, enough. We can't be in a debate society for another 6 months. We need to actually develop a plan. And that has to happen at one point with the executive committee level. It has to happen one level below that with the senior leadership. And then you need to take it to the board. And again, the board, you have to repeat the process. Hey, we are not sure and we'd love to have your ideas. And everyone comes out of the woodwork and gives the ideas. But finally, again, you have to get to closure. So that has been the most challenging process. But I think it has also been a very rewarding process, because we allowed so many different perspectives and so much discussion that finally we got to a consensus. And I believe we got to a very high level plan going forward. But that has been the challenge for the last 3 months.
Wonderful. Final question, and a lot of companies and sectors, Mr. Dutta, which have gone through pain, employee cost, salary slashes have happened. Few companies where things have normalized, they've decided to hire now, roll back salary cuts. If things stabilize for the aviation sector and for Indigo in coming quarters, in coming months, should we expect the same from you?
So we had 3 series of painful, three sets of painful employee decisions to make. One was pay cut, one was furlough or a layoff, and the third was leave without pay. So we'll go back in reverse, if you will. So leave without pay, we are gradually reducing. Obviously, if as we had capacity, we can afford to do that. So for the frontline crew, for example, we started at close to 10 days of leave without pay, which is when we had the shutdown. So we were not flying, but we said, hey, we'll pay you for 20 days of work, if you will, while you're at home. And that 10 days now, we've reduced gradually to 3 days. So as you can see, we are on a steep decline, and obviously I'd love to get to 0 days, and I hope to get that as soon as early next year. Again, that's based on government lifting restrictions. Then there is the furloughs, and we've laid off, as you know, probably around 10-12% of our people. As we grow, we'll need some people back, but again, from a productivity standpoint, we don't want to hire everybody back. We are very focused on improving productivity. And by the way, if I may digress for a second, a nation's wealth creation comes from productivity improvements. So improving productivity is very, very important, not just for Indigo, but for the whole country, and we're focused on that. And then the third will be the pay cuts. The pay cuts will happen last, I would think, but gradually we'll try and restore all these things.
Mr. Dutta, it's been a fantastic interaction and so nice to hear that for a sector which in a sense was almost on the brink of hitting a disaster patch, things are looking up. Yes, it's a tough time, but it's been a tough time. But the fact that you managed to convert a lot of crisis into opportunity just talks about the incredible leadership currently Indigo has. So thank you very much. Wish you all the best, and I certainly hope that we get to interact much more going forward. It's our first interaction on this forum, so it's been an absolute delight to host you.
Thank you for inviting me to this. Thank you very much.